I figured you did.
Okay, email. Okay, I'm gonna admit people, cool?
Okay, yeah.
All 6 right now. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us and for understanding our time differences. You are welcome to have your camera on or off. We're going to wait a couple minutes. You were all muted when you came in, but you should be able to unmute yourself. So if you want to say hi or anything. And just like most of the conference, we are recording, so you know, and it should just be speaker view. So if and when you do speak, you will be recorded, and it will be shared with other conference participants. Amazing. Great. Paying attention to the participants in the waiting room. Cool.
Hi, Stephanie.
Hey, Karen, how are you?
Good. Yeah, just put it on mute.
I know we have people joining us from all different time zones. And like I said, I thank you all for your patience and understanding today with those that we were on Pacific time and that misunderstanding. So thank you so much. We're so happy you're here, and we'll send the recording to everyone else who signed up. I understand some people for the conference were excited to attend sessions in general and are working during those times. So people are going to be popping in, and we will have an interactive session as much as you would like it to be. So as we go along, just know that anything that you share will be helpful for other people. I'm positive of it. So please feel free, and we'll talk about that in a moment as well. It is 03. Should we kick it off, Brian? Cool.
Yes, let's go for it. People can join in as we go along.
Great. So I am Stephanie Aronson. I'm so excited to be here. Brian and I are here to share our experiences with you, to find tangible ways to create action together when we look at food insecurity and the climate crisis and how those are interwoven. We are so excited to hear from all of you. While we did make sure there's time at the end for questions and conversation, we also welcome you to join at any point, and we have some specific moments throughout where we have questions for you. If you're uncomfortable sharing, you can note that in the chat, or you can unmute and let us know, but otherwise we're gonna have everyone introduce themselves shortly, as well as share a little about themselves. We are going to share about ourselves in a moment too. And like I said, this is for you. This whole presentation, this whole conference is for you. So we are here to answer questions, and also I'm sure other people here can answer questions too. So feel free to ask and answer and share experiences together so that we can leave here creating the action and the space that we are looking for. Do you want to switch the slides, Brian?
I'll take over. Yeah, thank you for the intro, Stephanie. And yeah, I just want to say thank you for everyone who attended or is here. It's so good to see you all. And very much reiterate that, you know, we want this presentation to be as conversational as possible that a virtual event can be. So yeah, definitely reiterating what Stephanie said, that feel free to jump in, whether that's through the chat or unmuting. We would love to get to know you all and have some conversations that aren't, you know, structured through our presentation here. That makes it fun for us. But I'll start here with some of that structure and kind of speak to the agenda that we have for today, so you know where we're going and what the purpose of this presentation is and what we hope to show you all today. So you all know what we're talking about is we're talking about food insecurity and how that relates to the climate. And really the gist of what we want to be talking about is how everyone can, should be, and really whether you know it or not, is involved in addressing both the climate and food security crises that we have. And so the way that we're breaking this up into sections today is talking about your impact, actions that work, where to start, and then of course in our cute language, working hand in hand, and how this is all work that we can be doing together. And with that agenda, I want to lay out some of the goals for our conversations that we'll be having today. First I want us all to think about how we are currently contributing, and we're really gonna be taking some time to think about, even if we aren't conscious of it, that there is ways that we're all contributing. We're also here to provide ideas and options. That includes that is not just Stephanie and I, but includes really everybody in this group that will be brainstorming those. And the purpose of this is to see that everybody really contributes in different and unique ways. These are really complex issues that we're talking about, and there are so many different ways to have an impact on complex issues. And one thing I do want to note, because these are very complex and we do have to recognize that these are global issues, food insecurity is something that obviously does not just take place in the US or in Washington or in Seattle, and the climate, of course, is global. But for the purposes of today's conversation, is we really want to be staying in our lane and speaking from our own experiences. So what that means for Stephanie and I is we want to talk about, what we do here in the Seattle region, and then specifically with the organizations that we work with. And so, we would like to keep all the conversations today to, be as focused as possible to your own experience, just to provide some focus there.
Awesome. So a little about who we are, and also while we're in screen share, if you want to see more faces, you can hover over your top bar and go to that 9 squared Zoom piece. So there's like the little dash, and then there's 3 other options. So just so you know, you can always do that and then control how many people you can see as well. And we'll stop screen sharing also at the end. So who are we? I'm Stephanie Aronson. I work for the Strom Jewish Community Center. I'm really lucky to have one of our amazing volunteers here as well. Karen is here, and I'll call on her in a moment. And I am the Community Development Manager. And what that means kind of morphs with what the community needs, honestly. And part of that has looked at our Mitzvah Corps initiative, which started in August. And we heard from the community through different avenues that there was a need for addressing the food insecurity space during the pandemic, and probably outside of it, and yet this is where we were right now. So my job is to listen, take information in, ask questions, talk to our volunteers, our lay leaders, and the staff members, and see how we can fill the gaps of what's needed in the community. The JCC, if you're familiar with Seattle, is located on Mercer Island, and we serve the Bellevue area, the Seattle area, Mercer Island, and whomever feels comfortable driving during driving times or joining us virtually. So our community is very large, and we're here to serve it in different ways. And I'm really happy that I was able to jump in and do so when people were in need.
Yeah, and a little bit about me. I'm Brian Sindell, and I'm the food bank manager at JFS in Seattle. We're located in the Capitol Hill neighborhood for those that might be local or visited before. And our food bank has 3 primary components that we run. We have an in-person food bank, which of course now has a lot of adaptations due to COVID. We have a home delivery program, and while it's currently on pause, we have had nutrition education programming as well. Through these services, we work with 1,200 households every month. And when I think about in terms of this conversation and how food insecurity and the climate are connected, a couple of things I'm really excited about that we do is we have partnerships with 3 local organic farms, and a lot of our produce is coming from these vendors. We also glean at a local farmer's market. And we also have a lot of partnerships with neighborhood growers who grow in their backyard, have fruit trees, and also community gardens as well. So that's something I'm very excited about.
Awesome, thank you. And I'll go in a little bit more detail about what the JCC has done and the impact we've had and how we got there. And I want to open the floor to hear who you are. So why, really give us the name you would like us to call you. You're welcome to include your pronouns. Brian and I both have them up here. He prefers he, him. I prefer she, her. So your name, your pronouns, why you chose this session. What made you want to come to the session? So Karen, can I call on you first?
Okay, Karen Lieberman, and I helped start the Kesher Garden on Mercer Island 10 years ago to teach children and adults how to garden and how they could be more giving in their community. And during COVID, we went into high gear trying to produce and grow as much food as we could. And Stephanie has been fabulous getting it to people. It's just been frustrating because of just getting it to the people that need it because of COVID. So I think that was my biggest frustrations. And then I wanted to put seeds everywhere in every square inch of our property and get rid of all the grass and start growing food, which not everybody was thrilled about. But I do think that with a lot of people that I talk to that have home gardens and grow produce, and they say, geez, I've got 50 pounds of zucchini, what am I going to do? Is there a number you can call? Can you take it someplace close by to getting it from the homeowner or somebody even at work they're trying to have gardens to the people that need it?
Yeah. So Karen, thank you so much for sharing. I'm so happy you're here for so many reasons. And you also brought up the point of pride, which I just wanted to note. There's a few that you're getting to the right person. And this idea of asking for help is something that we can talk about later if we're seeing that in other communities as well. I'm gonna throw it to Janie, maybe Jani. Yeah, Janie, Johnny. Thanks.
Janie.
Oh, I didn't even get it. I'm so sorry. Janie, thank you.
Okay, it's not pronounced the way it's spelled, so what can I do? Talk to my parents. So I'm Janie Paulai. I live on Bainbridge Island. I have grown a lot of our food for probably 25 years, but more so now, even than I used to. The reason I joined in is that I wanted to be a part of this is because my interest really is in combining both serving the need of the community and the Jewishness. We have one congregation on the island. We serve all of Bainbridge and basically North Kitsap County and even people as far away as Port Townsend. So it's a big area. We have 2 food banks that our community supports. But part of it too is how to bring in people who I know are doing the work, but they're not connected Jewishly. And then members of our congregation or people I know who are Jewish who are not really into what the Jewish community could do as a whole. So it's a lot of that kind of stuff. It's not so much how to grow, what to grow, where to grow as how to help and making those connections. And actually even possibly, and I know this goes into a whole different thing, but possibly using this whole concept for getting unaffiliated Jews who are doing this kind of work to bring them in to the more active Jewish community.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. I think we'll be talking about some of those things. So that's great.
Yeah. Sure. Toby.
Hi, I'm Toby. I live in Seattle, and I am a total newbie. I have not had a vegetable garden in years, though I've grown tomatoes and flowers and other things. I have a raised bed that I just got. And, so it's one raised bed, but I saw this and I thought this would be a good way to inspire me about thinking about what I'm going to plant for the first time. And I don't know if I'll have any extra food, but if I do, it won't be very much. But I thought this would be an interesting thing to learn about. And I certainly support it. And I think that I am Jewishly affiliated. And so it seems like a great Tikkun Olam thing and a way to give back to the community.
Thank you for sharing. And every time I plant my garden, the amount of cucumbers I end up having, I'm like, what am I going to do? So you never know when you might have extra, like you said. And also, we'll touch on this later, but you never know what just knowing about it and sharing with neighbors, like the concept, can do and what that seed literally can spread, right? So thank you so much for coming, and please feel free to ask questions. We have some people who are definitely master gardeners here, and I'm sure they would be happy to assist as well as us. So thank you, Tony.
Great.
I saw someone write in the chat. So Irene is a vegan New Yorker. Irene, if you want to unmute, but otherwise I can read for you. So unmute if you'd like. And wants to learn about how to get healthier food to communities that do not have access to fruit and veggies that they need. Amazing. We have already in our script, and happy to touch on it more, touching on that along with constraints around fresh produce and getting fresh produce out to communities who are in need of it. So thank you so much for sharing that. And if you have other questions around it, please make sure to bring those up. Maureen. Oh, it's muted. It remuted. There we go.
We're both doing the same thing. I'm the unexperienced one, so I brought him into the experience.
Sorry, Maureen and Michael.
All right, I just joined, so I'm just trying to get the gist of it. Go ahead.
All good.
We're from Florida. We live in the Tampa Bay area. And Michael is the gardener in the family, and we have started a small herb garden that we're hoping the neighbors will be able to use, but we haven't gotten it big enough yet. And then we have a giant garden. He keeps taking away more grass, as someone else said, and planting more. And we're vegans also, so the more we can get from our garden, the less my grocery budget is. And our backyard has different kinds of trees. We don't have a big property, but where there's sun, there is something planted.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, I've been gardening for quite a few years, but I'm still always learning. There's always like new things to learn about how to do things more efficiently and more productively. And I'm at a little disadvantage because I don't use all the same nutrients that other people use. I don't use anything that has that animal product in it. So that does create a challenge, but I'm trying to overcome that and, try to use compost tea and occasionally synthetic fertilizers, which I'm trying to avoid, but
we also have rain barrels set up that we're trying to get to water themselves in the garden, but then you need the fertilizer that can go through the hoses, which
it's just
suggestions.
The pressure's not set up yet, but I'm working on that also. But we haven't used the city water in almost a year for our outdoors.
Wow.
So
That's impressive.
Yeah.
He also has done hydroponics, and we have, I don't know if they're considered earth boxes. These are all things he makes himself. We do not buy the pre-made stuff because he wants to find something to use for everything. So
I feel like we'll need a little tour of your operation.
He would love to give it to you.
Idea if we were set up for it right now.
We could carry this.
I thought your battery.
I could carry it on my phone if you have time at the end, we'll turn you on the phone and then take it.
Perfect.
That would be awesome.
Yeah.
The only problem is it's starting to get dark here, so so we'll see. We'll see if we have a chance.
Perfect. That would be really cool if you want to connect on your phone, just so it's ready at some point. Thank you so much for sharing. I know
you're the gardeners.
Everybody.
Everybody's into gardening.
some people are new, some people are into it already. Yeah.
So Maureen was saying about our front yard, we have one section where there's just herbs, and we've got it in the front by the sidewalk, and our hope is that it'll grow large enough that people can just walk by and take what they want. So that's the intent.
Oh, nice.
That is a dream of mine, to just have a big enough garden that I can invite people into. So you are living out my dream that hopefully I will get like a personal one, but I think Karen's looking at me because we kind of have that at the J. And you also bring up this idea, and I'm noting it, I'm writing this down, and Brian and I will interweave it into our conversation as well. This idea of like the time it takes to make it sustainable and make it impactful is, and the intention behind it, right? Like you can have a garden and that's wonderful and it can look a certain way. Hold on, I'm just gonna admit some people.
That's just me again.
Oh, perfect. And yet it also takes time to be intentional about it. So thank you for bringing that point up as well. Wonderful. August, if you would also like to share, please feel free to unmute now, or you can message in the chat a little about you.
Hi, I'm August. So I picked this session. I'm a home gardener. I'm in Chicago, so I'm still getting used to, I'm not from Chicago originally, I'm from the West Coast. So I'm still getting used to the seasons and the different growing climate here. But we had a very lovely, productive garden last year and ended up with like 50 pounds of squash that we didn't know what to do with. And ended up finding some neighborhood boxes that you could donate to. So that got me thinking about this. And I'm also interested in becoming a sustainability professional, working in architecture and seeing if I can, I'm looking for intersections between architecture and urban ag. So I thought that this could be a way to see what's out there. And also see if there's any way that I could connect it to Judaism, which would be a bonus.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. All of those things we can touch on, and we can also touch on more if you have other specific questions. So thank you. And I know I had a friend who went to school at Carnegie Mellon University. They have a pretty cool food sustainability program if you want to check that out. I see someone is in here called Owner, and you're welcome to unmute. We're sharing, you know, what brought you to this session, what name you prefer, your pronouns if you want, and what brought you to this session.
I guess I am Owner. I've never seen that on any of the Zooms I've been involved with. My name is Robin, actually, and I'm at a temple in Kalamazoo, Michigan, and we just had a Tu B'Shvat Torah evening, Havdalah, talking, thinking about Judaism and climate change and things like that. And this was one of the programs that were recommended. We might, I mean, this whole series is one of the things that was included in the link. I'm social action co-chair, and my other co-chair was going to attend. We were both going to come when we thought it was at 2 o'clock this afternoon. There was a little mix up with the time, so she couldn't come, and I came tonight late, and here I am, and I'm just going to listen. You know, we do various things with social action, and maybe we're going to choose an additional thing along with the church that we've been meeting with. We had a book club with the church social action committee on what's his name, who did the recent book related to the importance of veganism and not traveling, several things that were very important for climate change. Jonathan, forget his last name. So we have been in this discussion of how to take action on the micro level and the macro level. So,
amazing.
Thanks.
The timing.
I don't know why I'm here and why you can't see me, but that's okay.
If it turns on, wonderful. If not, we understand. This is the beauty of Zoom. it always comes with its own moments. And also being an online experience, that timing was on me. I apologize, and I appreciate you all making it here. I noted it at the beginning. My mind is in Pacific time. So thank you for making it here. We'll be sure everyone else gets a recording. And we had said this at the beginning, but I'm going to repeat it for the couple people who came in, which is anything we're sharing will help others, right? Like everyone here comes with something a little bit different and yet can leave with similar actions or interwoven pieces. And we'll talk about that in a moment. So I just want to say that any questions you have, any comments, any answers you have to someone else, please feel free to share. We are going to be going through a little bit more information in a moment, and yet we're here for you. So we have our notes of what we're doing interwoven with what you've just noted. We highly appreciate that. And if you have specific questions going forward, unmute or write it in the chat and we'll grab it as we go. I believe everyone who wanted to speak spoke. Is there anyone else I missed? Okay, great. Okay, wonderful. Brian?
Yeah, take it to the next section, but also this is exactly what we were hoping for. There is so much knowledge in this room that's not just Stephanie and I's, so this is great. So I just want to acknowledge that. So to get us on a little bit of grounding, just so we know what we're talking about when we talk about food insecurity and the food access crisis. You know, what is that? You know, the first thing I want to say is that food insecurity as a crisis is not new. The pandemic has certainly exacerbated it and put it more into the headlines, but it certainly existed before the pandemic. It's just things are a little bit worse now. I was kind of reflecting just last week, somebody asked me, how do I know that hunger is an issue? And I could pull a bunch of stats and all those things, and I do have some stats for you all, but I was thinking when I was talking to this person, the easiest way I could answer that is in Seattle alone, which is a very wealthy city. And while it's a large city, not a giant city, we have a population of well under 1 million people. We have 30 or more food banks in the city limits alone. And to me, that just speaks so much evidence to the issue of hunger. If a city the size of Seattle needs 30 food banks to make sure that all of our residents can get enough to eat, I mean, that just kind of really sends that issue of hunger home for me. But to also share some statistics, and especially for, you know, what impacts COVID has had on hunger. Well, starting out before COVID, and all this information I'm pulling is from Feeding America. 1 in 7 children in the state of Washington struggled with hunger. And food insecurity in the state of Washington, just across the board for all households, was around 14%. Since COVID, there's been a lot of more data coming out. In Washington state, the percentage of households experiencing food insecurity has now doubled, and 30% of households in the state of Washington are now reporting that they have issues accessing nutritious food. And then when we dive a little bit deeper into that to like understand which households are experiencing this, what also came out of that is 59% of households that are food insecure are households with children. So there's a very outsized impact on larger households in households of children-aged folks. And then we also know that this is not following equally across people of different backgrounds. BIPOC communities are also more hardly hit by this, the pandemic. And a stat that I found was in Washington state, the Black community experiencing food insecurity has risen from 31% to 51%, which was pretty astounding. And for Hispanic or Latino families, it has risen from 21% to 33%. So that's just a little bit of context and background for what we're speaking to in the food security and food access crisis. To connect to the theme here of, you know, how does this relate to the climate? How is this all connected? Why are we talking about this topic today? Food security crisis and the climate are inextricably linked. They cannot be disconnected from each other. We cannot have a healthy food system without a healthy ecosystem. And conversely, we can't have a healthy climate if we don't have a healthy food system. There's just no way we can separate the two. There's another glaring reality that I'd like to point out is that these are both issues of justice. People with marginalized backgrounds, kind of as I spoke to before, are going to be the ones who suffer the greatest impacts to both of these issues. So that's another way that I really find that they are connected. But on the positive side of things, any work that is being done to address food insecurity is going to have a positive impact on the climate. And anything that we're doing to address climate issues is also going to have a positive impact on food insecurity. So, because they're interconnected is not just the bad issues, but there's the good in that, everybody's sharing that, if you're growing food at your house, that has a positive impact on the climate. It also can have a positive impact on food security. And so, we can really use that as not a thing to make us get down or depressed, but actually feel like you can address multiple issues at once. And so, we just had this conversation and I feel like everybody shared so much, but, really why we're here is to think about how we are all contributing. And, going back to the point that there's so many different ways because these issues are so complex that you can kind of decide like what actions make the most sense for you. You can't take them all on, but they're all important in different ways. And we were going to ask for people to share, how actions that you're taking, but I feel like in everybody's intros, we did such a solid job of that I don't think anybody needs to share anything more about what you're doing already.
Amazing. And you're welcome to put in the chat, I see something now, and share as we go, and we will have space for that. Yeah, you may share the link with whomever you want, whoever just asked that. So please feel free to send it and I'll admit them when they join. Thank you for asking. And yeah, I think it's so impressive as you were sharing. I was thinking about, first of all, I was thinking, oh, we hit the nail on the head with a lot of the topics we had already chosen to address, which made me feel really good. And I was thinking about how much work you're already doing, even if you don't realize how much you're doing. This idea of like on Bainbridge Island, trying to connect people who are already doing that work. That's a beautiful way of viewing it, where it's saying, people are already doing this. I want to help them with their impact. And that's kind of where this stemmed from. And all of you who are leading a vegan lifestyle, and I mean, I'll admit, I don't lead a vegan lifestyle. And when you're doing that and you're doing it beyond just the food you're consuming, but like you were saying, Michael, with what is in your garden and what you're producing, that is having that impact on the climate as well in a different way. And that intentionality we put behind it is so important and so beautiful. And I've learned the lesson, at least from my sustainable actions, that when I take a moment to take those actions, and it's hard at the beginning, it's so much easier as I go. It becomes my habits. And that's what I always tell friends and family. Like, it's okay if you just pick one thing to do this entire month that's new, because it's always going to be something new. And that'll be hard at the beginning. And yet it will be part of your habits moving forward. And I would say that's the same as we look at it from a Jewish perspective. If you choose to want to look at something from a Jewish perspective, if you choose to infuse that, it feels hard at the beginning, and it might be hard at the beginning. And as you continue to do that and continue to share with people, it will be different. And we wanted to note that there's so many different ways of exploring addressing these crises, and that can be from your Jewish identity, whether you know it or not. We can talk through those options if you're interested in exploring that more. It might be from a secular piece. It might be from, I'm from an interfaith family, so some of my values come from this other religion that was infused in my upbringing because that's how one of my parents grew up, and my grandparents, right? It might be from secular or a different religion. It might be from somewhere else, and that is all beautiful. And no matter what reason you're addressing it is wonderful and great. And there's always room to explore more. And so I'm going to touch on a few of those Jewish pieces. We do have it on another slide as well, but I think now is a good time also to share like the perspective of how to be addressing this might come from, the first one I always think of is B'Tselem Elohim, that we're all created in God's image. And I like to adjust that. I work with teens a lot too. We're all created in the same image, because people might not believe in God, or they might believe in God differently. Let me rephrase. People believe in God differently, or don't believe in God at all. And yet you can still have this wonderful connection with the earth around you. And so we are all created in the same image, for me, has really resonated as I continue, especially this year. And thinking about that from food insecurity, where I deserve food and so does every single human that I come into contact with and don't. And so that idea, yes, it's a Jewish idea, and yet is it only a Jewish idea? No. And yet I like to explore it from a Jewish perspective. And I like to think of it of how, and then I connect that to this idea of eravut, which is like responsibility. To whom and what am I responsible for? And so I connect this idea of exploring, you know, I am in this image and so is every other human being. And then to whom and what am I responsible for? And for me, that answer is every human being. And yet I can't give food to every human being. I do not have that access or authority or money. I just don't have that time. Like, that is not something within my capability. And so something else I get to think of is what's within my capability. And Karen and I in the garden, while we're weeding and harvesting, we have these conversations. And I know that JFS and Brian will talk about it in a moment. You know, we have these conversations about who are we giving to today? And making that decision can be really daunting. If you have that extra 50 pounds of zucchini, I think the person from Chicago noted that maybe. And, you know, it's hard to think like, who am I giving this to? And I think a beautiful way of thinking of it is not who am I not giving this to, but who am I sharing this with? Because you are sharing with someone, and that is so, so beautiful. And so as we're going through this, and there's a few other pieces that will interweave from a Jewish values perspective and ways of looking at these, we're saying crisis, and I feel like that's so daunting, and it's real, it is a crisis, and yet we feel like everyone here is doing work and will continue to do work, whatever that looks like, even if it means you're creating food for yourself in your garden, maybe sharing with a neighbor here and there, that is doing work. That is being respectful towards the earth around you. That is making sure you have food access, which is important because that means no one else has to make sure. Not that it's a burden to anyone, but that means that you're doing your job so that other people have space for it, right? And that means that you're contributing to the climate as well because you're planting seeds. So there are all of these ways that we are doing work. If you like to be a home gardener, if you're trying to be a home gardener, if you're creating food that you're giving to food banks, all of these are so important. And so I want to validate all of your actions and say, if you want to do something different or for a different reason or a new reason, it's there. And if you are continuing to do these beautiful actions, that is incredible and amazing. And I hope that you think about that next time you are doing those moments, you're taking that moment. Do you want to switch the slide for us? And so, sorry, I have a few things up here that I'm looking at. So I was just kind of touching on the actions that we have taken. And I also want to pause for a moment and say, you know, what have you seen for yourself that works the best? Like, what is something that you're like, oh, that worked so well. I'm so happy that this worked, whether it's looking at food insecurity or whether it's looking at the climate crisis or maybe the way that they're woven together. Does someone want to share? Yeah. Johnny.
Janny.
Janny. Oh, I'm sorry.
That's
Janny.
okay. Just one quick thing. There's a person on the island who has a community. They have enough property that they set up a community garden on their property. And the only requirement is that, and I don't know what the percentage is, but regardless of who you are, income, anything like that, you have to give a certain percentage of what you grow to our local food bank.
Oh.
And it's been an amazing success. And one of the things that really resonates with me about it is that there are people who grow food there who don't have property to grow food on, who maybe can't afford to, you know, do as much as they're doing in this community food bank. And yet it's that story of the man who had so little on Shabbos, but he still invited the stranger who had less. Mm-hmm. So it's having people who have even less grow for people, you know, it's that, and it does a lot for self-esteem, not just for contributing food. And that just, I don't know anybody else who does that. Maybe a lot of people, a lot of community gardens do, but that just spoke to me.
In my experience, a lot of community gardens offer it or say something, but don't necessarily that impactfully. Brian, I think I cut you off.
Oh yeah, I mean, I was basically going to say the same as I have yet to see where it's actually built into, you know, there's that option as Stephanie was just saying, but I've never seen it actually built in as like, if you're signing up, this is something that you are signing up for to do. And I love that it's just part of the whole operation. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. And Robin, we had gone around and noted our names, our pronouns, if you would like to say what you prefer and why we chose this session. So if you have something you want to share now, or if you have something you want to share about why you chose to come here, you are also welcome to do that.
Okay, I am the person that was owner a little bit ago.
Oh, sorry. Oh, there you go.
Okay, I switched to my work computer. Here it is. Here's my video. But I could answer the current question. Just
Perfect.
in terms of what you said, if we all are saying things that are working in our communities, maybe it'll spark some ideas in other communities. Not that anything I'm going to say is unique, I don't think. One thing at our food co-op, our city has a food co-op, and they've done a couple things. One is outside of the co-op, they, in the summer, we're in Michigan, they grow vegetables for anybody to just take. So, and they have purposely moved in a community that would have less food access. So that's one nice thing. Another thing that the co-op has done is we do have a farmer's market, and they were very active in getting double up food vouchers for people who are getting, in Michigan, I don't know what it's called in other states, but if you are food insecure and you get money from the government towards food, there's a policy, at least in Michigan, that you can, if you're getting fresh fruit and vegetables at the farmers markets, you can get double the amount. We have these vouchers. So the co-op was very active in advocating in the community to have that in place, and it's in place, and that's been very successful. And I guess the third one I would toss out, we have a daytime shelter for people who are vulnerable, homeless or mentally ill or whatever reasons. And then we as a temple have been serving food at that soup kitchen for like 20 years, once a month. But more recently, people, not us, people organized to create a garden outside the land there. And the participants who come to receive services who want to are gardening now. And they had a great success with volunteers too. So they're getting food, and that's the food that's being used to make these beautiful salads now at lunchtime. So I thought that was cool too.
I love those examples, and they're great examples of how organizations and or businesses can have such a large impact just because of their size. And so, you know, speaking of co-ops, I mean, I would definitely give a shout out to co-ops as well. We're located directly across the street from a local co-op here. And they have a program where shoppers can round up their bill and we get the proceeds from those to purchase food from them. Mm-hmm. And then it's great because the food that they purchase is all from local, you know, providers and high quality organic growers. So, you know, we're able to purchase things that are usually can be outside of a food bank's budget. So those are great examples, and also a shout out to co-ops.
Yeah, and they have a motto that I don't remember at all, but it's partly food for people, something, and the environment. So it is making that connection that I think you're trying to make the connection here today, how they're connected.
Yeah. I froze for a moment, so I apologize. Tell me if I'm reiterating something, but something that we've done as well is work with farmers at farmers markets, right? Farmers are already at farmers markets. Like, it's perfect because there's already a group of people there. And I would go to the Mercer Island Farmers Market at the end, and I had spoken to the manager there and all of the farms, and they would give the JCC, they would give me to bring to the J their leftover food that they would have taken back to the farm to compost or to use for sometimes for feed for animals. They didn't need it, So they were happy to donate it. And what I always heard was, we want to donate this. We do not have time or staff time to drive it into the city or to drive it to a food bank. It's a Sunday, nothing's open, and we don't have the time to do this. And so it was really interesting when someone had said, and it might've been Karen, like, there's already a hub of people there and a bunch of food available. And we received probably like 900 pounds over 2.5 months from them to bring to places like the JFS, the Jewish Family Service, Pollock Food Bank, or a different food bank in the city. And that was incredible. It took carrying a lot of boxes on my part. So you do need someone who's willing to like get their clothes a little bit dirty sometimes if those peaches are really ripe, and you have to have a connection, and we'll talk about it in a moment, but using resources, and people are so innovative. So that was really wonderful. Any other actions that someone wants to note, to share?
Yeah, I've got one.
Sure.
I've been involved a little bit with some neighborhood mutual aid organizations in the area. And I know they existed before COVID, but for me, I really started to notice them being more active during the pandemic. But a lot of the work that my neighborhood organizations were doing was on food insecurity, and there was a lot of just organizing around people trying to connect. Like, I know this grocery store has a bunch of boxes of food because I work there. Could anybody use this? And so they would just make these connections, and then somebody would go and pick it up. And so just having these, it's organized on a giant Slack channel. But that, just having a constantly updated open message board where people can say, this is a source of food that I've heard about. And then people can connect that way, has been really, I think, effective.
Amazing.
Yeah, we've definitely seen a lot of mutual aid groups in Seattle as well. And I think it's great. I mean, to me, it just speaks to so much of, there is a lot of work that larger organizations are doing, you know, like food banks and the JCC and other orgs. But there are so many gaps that still exist, and that, you know, I highly encourage folks to contribute to organizations that already exist, because we have so much infrastructure and can make really large impacts. But also, I think it just speaks so much to that you also don't have to rely on organizations, that neighborhoods have so much resources and the abilities to do a lot of the work themselves too, if you come together. So I've been really interested in seeing what's been happening with mutual aid groups during the pandemic. So thank you for sharing that.
And it also gives choice to those organizations that are in existence, which we'll touch on constraints momentarily, but it does give choice. Like, you don't just show up and say, hey, we have this. And it gives them the chance to say, great, we'll be in at this time. Great, someone will be able to receive this. Or, hey, why don't you try over here? So that's a really beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Something else I've seen that I want to note before we go to the next slide is this idea, and I say I've seen it, I've heard it. It's so hard with the pandemic to be connecting with neighbors, but I think, Karen, you're the one who brought up this idea of pride and asking for help. And it's something we explore a lot at the JCC. And I know that Jewish Family Service explores this too. And, you know, we can be there and we can have food, but if people don't want to come, or if there's some barrier in the way. And so what I've started thinking about a lot is just the fact, like, I grew up in the middle of a state park in a neighborhood where our neighbors would just give us, like, they had chickens, they would give us eggs. We had extra kale, we would drop it off. We had an asparagus farm, we would give it to them more than they probably ever wanted. And like, it's just giving. And they don't have to tell me I need food, I'm just giving it to you. And so that's something I encourage you to mull over and tell me if I'm right or wrong here. But something we've heard a lot on the island is, like, Mercer Island, often people think it's this place where it has dual income families or one person who's making a ton of money. And maybe Bainbridge also has some type of stereotype there, I'm not sure. And yet there are people who are living in mansions who are food insecure. And there's a reason, and you don't, like, I don't know your life. I don't know my neighbor's life completely. I don't know if they lost a job. I don't know everything. And so if I'm just offering and having it available, that is something sometimes really beautiful for people. Kind of like Maureen and Michael, the garden that you noted, where people can just come and grab herbs and they don't have to ask, which is beautiful. You can unmute. I see someone who, yeah.
We do have a similar stereotype. And what I was going to say is that don't make assumptions. Because, I mean, we've discovered over the years working for social service organizations on the island that there are people out in the woods in tiny little hovels who are barely getting by, or some don't even have electricity. The harder thing, and I don't know about, I mean, Seattle, you see so much on the streets downtown, but I don't know about in surrounding areas. What's hardest, and I don't know how you access it, are people who are literally in the woods. And, you know, they've got tents set up and they're, I mean, look at, we're the size of Manhattan and we have 25,000 people. So what's not homes and farms, there are woods. And a lot of times you don't know people are there. And that to me is a hard one to crack, as far as finding them, being in touch with them, making them feel okay about it, you know, all of those things wrapped up together. If anybody has ideas.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing that I was gonna say is the point that you bring up is that no two communities are at all alike. And, you know, like you're saying, comparing Bainbridge Island, which is just right across the water from Seattle, is so different. And I mean, you know, we don't have that issue here. That's not really something that we experience. And so, I mean, I'm glad you asked if anybody has ideas, because sticking to my, staying in my lane, that's not my lane.
But you do actually, I mean, surrounding neighborhoods, there are people who you don't know are there that are homeless.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm not talking downtown because they're right on the street in front of us all. But whether it's Mercer Island or Shoreline, they're there, and more now than ever before.
It's a issue that's been in our news here in Kalamazoo lately, because there are homeless, they call it encampments, but it's really what you're saying. There's people that have set up tent areas in the woods or outskirts. And it's a struggle to know how to work with that. What partly seemed to be most successful is there was a couple things. One was led by a pretty activist minister who invited some of the people who were homeless to start talking together, start meeting together, and became an advocacy group, really, to advocate for the needs. And another thing is some people who have themselves been homeless, but have skills, perhaps even professional skills in social work, or have those type of skills. And they're the ones that are leading some people to go literally searching, as you're saying, into the woods, seeing who's there, somebody who knows what the people have dealt with, that understand some things that are important to them. Especially, it's not so much for food, because in our town, there are people donating food. And like I say, everyone knows where you can go to get meals, because we have a very good social network for that here. It's a lot more for healthcare access and warmth, because it's winter here in Michigan. But it does seem to be taking some people who can be leaders, not just good-hearted people from my temple or something, but people who have been in the experience before.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Toby, for noting in the chat, yeah, there's people who are suffering financially or who are food insecure anywhere, and they may have lived in their homes for many years. There may be a lot of reasons. And actually what all three of you are saying, if you want to click to the slide, Brian, is also what we as organizations and what we also feel like can be replicated as individuals or in your organization, which is crowdsourcing, right? Like using people who know and who have done it. And so we can bring education, we can bring light, we can bring our mitzvot, our want, our desire to do something kind and beautiful. And yet, is it as helpful as it can be if we're not hearing people, hearing from the group we're working with or trying to work with? Yeah, not for, but rather with, trying to help, trying to assist, trying to bring in, right? Like as a lot of people say in Judaism, like bring under our tent. And so the thing that the J does when we're analyzing communities is, one, we just listen. And it's almost the hardest thing, because the first thing everyone wants to do, including staff members, is jump into action. And I'm often the person who's like, let's listen a little more. And then let's ask questions too. That's part of our listening process. And it's not that we can't try to start with actions as well. Like, you know, obviously if there's a big problem, we don't want to just say, let's wait until we know everything. We are going to work, and yet listening is the most important part. And in our individual lives as well, sometimes, like listening, because we hear people asking for help in those silences and in those moments where they're not actually articulating it sometimes. And so being able to listen and inquire is a very unique thing, and is also, again, going back to those Jewish values, a Jewish thing, right? Like we are an inquisitive people, and asking questions is encouraged. And so listen, inquire, and then think about the JCC. This is what we do. Number one, listen and inquire. Two, think about our values. Is this something, our values and our skills, is this somewhere that we can be in this space? Does this make sense for our mission? Can we gift it to someone else? Like if there's a different organization that makes sense, should we just connect with them? And that's number three, is connect. Like before we got into the food space, and since August, we've donated over 1,600 pounds of food with the help of Karen and her husband, Howard, and the help of many community source people. So we used our Kesher community garden. We had food donated from the community, which is still coming in all the time. And we worked with the farmers as well, who donated hundreds of pounds of food. And we have donated food to the community but we first connected. We said, what do people need? What do the organizations need? Is it our job just to share information about other organizations and say, hey, you can go here. Let's advertise these spaces. Or should we get involved in a different way? Where is that gap that's needed? And so that idea of listening and inquiring, looking at our values, looking at our skills, and then connecting and using those questions and that listening to connect with the right people and spaces. Like we thought we would be distributing food. I'll admit, we wanted to be distributing food. That's what the school district told us was needed. That's what we heard from Mercer Island Youth and Family Services. We set up this whole thing. Karen taught me before, right? Bag some food. We had it, and it just, people, I don't know why. People didn't come, people didn't want to. We still did distribute food to some people. And yet what we really needed to do was bring it to the Jewish Family Service Food Bank and another food bank in the city, depending on who needed what at what time. We spread it around. Sometimes Karen would bring it to a food bank on Mercer Island, right? We looked at different places and we adjusted accordingly. And so that's kind of like a way, and I realize this is what I do when I'm looking to work with nonprofits in my personal life as well. And what the teams that I facilitate programming with, what we do, right? We listen and inquire, we ask questions, we look at our values, and then we connect with others to see where our space is. Brian, do you want to talk a little about JFS? I know we're running low on time.
Yeah.
If everyone wants to stay for like 5 minutes, we'll wrap it up in a moment.
Yeah, I appreciate everybody staying on if you're able. Yeah, I mean, at JFS, things really look very similarly as they do as what Stephanie shared at the JCC. The pandemic has put our food bank in a position where we are really looking to reconfigure and reevaluate our approach of like, how are we actually addressing food insecurity with the most impact in our community? And so what that's looking for us right now in live time is that we're creating a stakeholders group. And when we're putting this group together, we really want all relevant stakeholders at the table. So that includes staff, that includes our board, that includes donors, and most importantly, includes subject experts. And when I say subject experts, that's both on the provider side of food insecurity, but also on the recipient side, because that voice is so important to have when we're making decisions on how we're going to be most impactful. We really need that voice, and that voice can oftentimes be missing from these conversations. We also are pulling relevant information. So some of the stats that I listed off before about how food insecurity has increased, who's it hitting? It's hitting, households with children. It's hitting the BIPOC community the hardest. Like, this is all very important information for us to use to guide how we will, move forward and become the new version of our food bank. And moving with all this information that we have and all the stakeholders, everything that we do is, of course, going to be informed by this and guided by all this information. But in the end of the day, it all operates on somewhat of a trial and error. And so for us to be the most successful organization, we need to set goals and evaluation points so that we can see what we're doing. Is this working? And then being completely open to shifting course. I mean, if there's nothing else that we've learned from this pandemic, is that we have to be flexible and adaptable. And so, we can't just say, oh, we think this is what the best way to approach this need, and we're going to stick to it. If it's not working, we go back and we do it differently. And so, every community is unique, as we were just talking about, different issues. But I think the approaches that both Stephanie and I have shared are things that are universal, regardless of the issues that you're looking at.
Awesome. And I had touched on the Jewish values. Honestly, besides there's so many that can connect to this. And the last one I'll say is this idea of Tu B'Shvat and marking the birthday of the trees, how it's often translated, like marking those moments that are meaningful, right? Do we mark it with passage of time, our lives, or do we mark it with moments that are meaningful? And I would say that all that you're doing, no matter what it might be, there's meaningful moments, whether you're on your hands and knees working and tending your own garden, whether you're donating food, whether you're talking with a neighbor and connecting them with someone, or you're the organization, there are these beautiful moments. And so, especially with this pandemic, we're looking at, we are always like saying we're X months out, and I would encourage us, and something I've been thinking about a lot with Tu B'Shvat is how can we be living in the moments of beauty and marking our time by that, rather than by letting time itself dictate pieces. Something to consider. Yeah.
Quick thing also is when you talked about listening, listen to what your food bank is telling you also, because a lot of times they don't want you to contribute food. They don't want you to go to Costco. They really want you to write a check because they have far more buying power than we do. Fresh fruit and vegetables is one thing, but if you don't garden and you don't have all that, you still can donate. And that really is very helpful for food banks.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for saying that.
Brian, there was a question as we look at the last slide, if just to wrap it up, including your idea of this, connecting it with the climate crisis. So if you could reiterate that one more time as you take us through this last piece. Yeah,
of course. And we'll do a little bit of a bridged version of this last slide, as I know we are already past time. But thanks for highlighting that. I did not see that in the chat. So we just want to hit on 4 key points that we think are essential to grow it, having the greatest impact possible. Starting out, I want to talk about partners. As I said at the beginning, these issues are so complex. And so the idea of taking this on your own and not connecting with other people who are interested or organizations that have already been doing this work is not going to be the best strategy to go. Don't try to be going it alone. And so, just even a food bank, which is already, for us, we're already a larger organization. We have so many partners and we would not be able to do any of the work that we do without them. We're part of the Seattle Food Committee, which is the committee of all the food banks in the city of Seattle, Northwest Harvest, Feeding America. We also have a partnership with the LDS Church. And this has been such an amazing instrumental partnership for us, as they actually provide us with all of the hygiene items that we distribute at our food bank. If we did not have that partnership, we would not have any vendors for that. So just also saying there's some unexpected partnerships that can be really fruitful. And then outside of that, we don't just partner with people who are involved in the food security arena. We are partnering with healthcare providers, housing providers, mental health providers. You know, for us, when we take the big picture view and we ask, you know, why does hunger exist in our community? The answer isn't because there isn't enough food. It's a much more complicated picture than that. And so if we're not really looking at these root issues and how other organizations are addressing them, we're not addressing the whole issue. So partners are so important. And on top of that, some of the partnerships that we hold that I had talked about before was with, you know, local growers and organic growers and our co-op. You know, when we address food insecurity, we don't want to, you know, take away from any other work that's being done. We find it equally important that we can support our local community, whether that be through organic growing practices, through the local economy. And so if we can invest our food bank dollars, our donor money, to support things that are benefiting our local economy and local environment, that's something that we feel is so important to also addressing food insecurity. We feel that if we are only supporting you know, big ag, that's going to not help our environment. It is going to not help our local economy. We want our local farmers to stay in business. And so we think all these things are really all connected to each other. And I can talk a little bit more about climate more too, but I am gonna pass to working with neighbors to Stephanie.
I feel like we did touch on this, the talking to and working with neighbors, as well as pieces of involving the community. So I'll just highlight a couple points here, and I'm happy to stay on also if people have questions, but really this idea of like, we are stronger together. And so if you have a garden and you want your garden to be bigger, maybe your neighbor also wants a garden and will let you grow it into their yard, right? This idea of working with neighbors is, it can be anything you want it to be, and it can be imaginative and it can be different. And that in and of itself, sharing the food with neighbors, right? All of those pieces are impactful. And like we said before, we don't know everyone's individual ability or their individual private kind of financial piece right now or anything like that. And so anything you can do to tell neighbors what you're doing, who you're working with, or share food if that's what you're growing, but even just sharing a message is so beautiful and can change someone's life. And I mean that because I also want all of you to know that even you just saying, hey, did you know you can grow your own produce at home, in your home, on your terrace, whatever, you know, on your patio, in your apartment, whatever that looks like, that can help someone who's really having a crisis. Like that little bit of knowledge and encouragement. It doesn't mean everyone has to grow their own food. And if you're doing it, wonderful. But it means that you sharing a piece of what's exciting for you can truly help someone else. And that's something we talk about a lot with the teens, as well as, you know, involving the community. We have community members come into the Kesher Community Garden. We hosted a few Cub Scout groups. And so just sharing this idea of food insecurity and empathy and how we put our values into play and who we share with kids and their parents who are with them. And so with community members or whomever is interested is really a beautiful thing. And it encourages them to ask questions and go home and mull it over and think about, why are we getting plastic from the store? Remember when we were there? And so again, this interconnected piece of like sharing one message about food insecurity and pulling that up and how we address it from a sustainable standpoint, it really does have this peripheral effect around so many pieces of our lives. And I've seen in so many different people, and especially the children who come through, those questions about, oh, what am I doing? What do I ask for my birthday? What is really important? And some of them have said like, oh, I just want people to donate to a local food bank. And that's not what you have to do. And yet if there's a 10-year-old who now wants that for their 11th birthday, and that's what their grandparents, aunts and uncles and such are, that is so cool. So again, spreading that message, spreading why it's important to you and listening to others really does make an impact.
I thought that was great. And I think that it would be a great wrap up based on timing and everything you just said. I think that kind of ties it all together for me. And I want to still provide time if people are willing to. We could do a conversation, we can do Q&A. This is really, we're over time, but this last bit of time is really for all of you to make sure you get all the information or anything shared that you'd like to.
Sure. And Brian, do you want to stop screen sharing so people can see our group that is here still? Wonderful.
So my intent is, certainly to get a garden at the home that's sustainable for at least for us, but also be a role model so that other people who can see it can realize that they can do the same thing in their own home. And if you just basically get the word out how you can go about doing this, then maybe that also will give opportunities to maybe someone who is near others who are food insecure, they can share with them. Just the more this spreads, I think the more success we'll have with getting the objectives that you're trying to achieve.
Amazing.
Yeah,
and I think
in that vein, I've a lot of my friends who grew huge perennial gardens, and they'd walk into my garden and what's that? What's a blueberry plant? Well, it's really pretty. I said, yeah, take out that rose and put in a blueberry plant. And that helps the environment as well, because, even if you're using the same amount of water, at least you're growing things that you're consuming, and it's the food forest. I mean, Seattle has a food forest. It's not exactly what they want it to be ultimately. We've started a food forest on Bainbridge. The idea of that some families can walk through and literally just pick some fruit or vegetables and take it home. I think that's amazing. One thing that just came to mind, because we have a whole organized thing throughout our island that Bainbridge Prepares, and it's all about earthquake preparedness and tsunami preparedness and everything else. And then we have neighborhood, like little groupings. And it just occurred to me, I don't know why it never occurred to me before, to, as part of that, include who grows what, who has the capacity, who stores what, that's another thing to think about too, is what happens to all of us when, not if, when we have a major earthquake, at least in the state of Washington. And we live on an island. They're telling us we need 2 weeks to a month's worth of food because the ferries won't be down, and we'll lose a bridge and the ferries will be down. What do we do? And it's someplace like, I know this sounds weird, the Hawaiian Islands. With all the visitors they have such a limited amount of food on those islands that it's something that they're having to address. They would be in trouble. So you never know where you are, that you would think, we would have a lot of food, which is probably not necessarily the reality. Permaculture is very helpful. I have a son who's studied it, and in making the most out of small spaces. That's another thing, is that my son rents actually a house from us. It's a tiny house on a tiny, a postage stamp piece of land. And he told me that he was going to put 10 fruit trees in the front yard. And I said, there is no way, Jeremy, you're overly enthusiastic. There is just no way. He's got 10 fruit trees and boxes, and he's growing native things as much as possible, all edible. It's remarkable. And I keep saying, teach people, Jeremy, teach people. So that's another thing we all need to do, is teach.
And in that teaching also, how to store. You brought up an amazing point of, and that's.
I'm not good at that.
It's hard, and it's hard to know how are we storing food, and can people have capacity to store food? Because the last thing anyone wants when they're giving away food and trying to assist in food insecurity is food waste. that's the last thing everyone wants. And yet, unfortunately, it happens. And so I know, like, Brian's nodding because him and I and Andy and I at the food bank talk about this. And, you know, we try not to donate things where they're like, everyone donated kale this week. If you donate kale, please just go somewhere else. Like, you know, because either they can't store it right then, or they just know someone doesn't need it. And also, like, when I'm giving food away, it's like, does someone have the refrigerator space, the freezer space, and, you know, knowing how, and do they have the know-how? If you've never had this food before or prepared this food, do you have the knowledge to store it well and in a healthy way is something? Do you have the knowledge to prepare it in a healthy way? And that is actually really important, because not everyone grows up with the same food, right? Like, when did avocados come into our lives? Right? Unless you were traveling, maybe not until 20 years ago or so, right? A lot of people, they don't always eat the same food as others. And there's a lot there to help and assist with food waste as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point from the food bank perspective. And we see that so much. And two things that we try to do for that is, one is some of the farms that we partner with, so on the bigger scale, but this could be done on a small scale as well, is we speak to them in the winter, you know, before the growing season, and talk about what type of produce is going to be the most useful for us this year, and what can you specifically grow that's going to benefit the people who visit our food bank. And then secondly, is we, of course, you know, as Stephanie was talking about, kale is going to grow in Seattle no matter what, and we're going to get tons of it, and it's very nutritious, but not everybody's used to it. And so, you know, we've had nutrition programming where we do cooking classes at the food bank, and do recipes with people there, and do tastings so that people get an idea of different ways to prepare it that we think are delicious and hopefully others do. And we try to include recipes with some of the produce that we get seasonally and give some people ideas. So those are some things that we do on the food bank side.
Thank you so much. Everyone, thank you so much for coming. Is there any lingering last question or thought to share? We appreciate all of your input so much. Go ahead, Karen.
Thank you. That's just nice. It's nice to talk to people from different parts of the country.
Yes.
And lucky me, I've had avocados my whole life. I came from Southern California.
Me too.
Oh, so you guys were rolling your eyes at me. We talk about it with my family, like, when did avocados come into our lives? Because I was on the Northeast and we didn't have them for a while.
What we shouldn't have in the grocery stores are cherries in January.
Yes.
And that's a whole nother climate food related issue that
transportation, yeah.
We should not be shipping food all over the world that just so that we can pay a lot of money for raspberries when they don't grow where we live.
But you can ship them all to here.
You grow plenty in Florida.
It's true. There's so many offshoots of this conversation as well. And I think it's something for us to mull over in the future. And I encourage all of you, next time there's something like this, you know, you can be a contributor, and notice how we crowdsourced a lot of pieces because we wanted to make it relevant. So I know the Big Bold Jewish Climate Fest and things like Limud as well would love to have any of you connect and share your expertise, your area that you're interested in, because I can promise you, I know I'll be interested after hearing from you all. And, you know, so I also encourage you to consider being presenters in the future. And thank you so much for participating. We appreciate it. This recording will be available either later today or tomorrow. Feel free to send it to friends or people in your organizations. And you have my email address, and I'll send that around again. And we appreciate you so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, you guys, for the work you're doing in your lives.
You all too.
You've chosen this as your livelihood. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for your support.
Take care.